I really do love when people recommend me some new material. I feel like I give some people the notion that I don't check out what you recommend me, unless you're trying to get me to check out something you wrote. But yeah, please recommend away. I'm not going to shy away from listening to stuff. Someone recommended me Cole Chaney and his album was great. Another one recommended Hopeless Romantic by Bobby Dove, and their album is probably my favorite country record this year. And someone gave me probably the best recommendation I've yet to have with Dave Cobb's Southern Family. 10 out of 10 masterpiece, and I'm doing a video on it. But there's one name that I've constantly got on my feed, and that's Koe Wetzel. And sure, I've heard the name before, critics have talked a lot about him online. He's a rock artist hailing from Texas who seems to blend the rootsiness of Texas country into his rock music. Almost 99% of the reception I've seen for this dude was overwhelmingly positive. Many people would make claims that he's just as strong as other indie artists like Cody Jinks, Sturgill Simpson, Tyler Childers. So I was very excited to see what the hype was about. I listened to his first 3 studio recorded albums because normally the one that isn't studio quality tends to be lackluster, if not bad. I'll probably edit my thoughts on the record right now because I'm not shooting for a video to be really long. So yeah, I listened to Noise Complaint, Herald So High, and Sellout. And after listening to them, I mean, they weren't horrible, but on the level of Sturgill Simpson, some of the best indie label work of the decade, like, I'm genuinely confused as to what people see in these records. And let me put a disclaimer here. So I watched this video called The Flaws of Internet Criticism, and it really opened up my eyes on how we consume and view pop culture, whether it be films, shows, or music. I highly recommend it. It goes into the never-ending struggle with different opinions that span across internet critic channels like mine. So this video isn't designed to negate your opinion of Koe Wetzel. If you truly think he's one of the best artists of our time, then good for you. I'm glad you found someone who's able to form connections with you and music. This is just my own perspective of his music, so don't let it ruin your own perspective and experience with Koe Wetzel. You have the right to agree or disagree with anything I say. Anyway, let's move on to it. So the first album I checked out was Noise Complaint. Based off the album cover, I was worried we were gonna get a musical travesty like all the Colt Ford records, and it wasn't that. Then again, that is a very low bar. The album has a 30-second intro basically saying any critical reception of this album is something they don't care about, and kinda openly admits that they're pandering to a certain demographic of southern college dudes. And like, okay, you're admitting this, and you are pretty open that you don't care about any critical reception. I mean, most artists don't unless you're this dude. But it kinda makes you seem like you're above criticism of your work when you clearly aren't, especially with this high-pitched voice Koe decides to put on. I'm reading way too much into this intro, so let's get into the actual music. The album opens up with a song called Something to Talk About, where Koe lists off all the horrible things he could do, whether it be robbing a bank, taking part in an affair, or literally dancing around in his own funeral. All of this to give them something to talk about. It makes it come off as if he's so desperate for attention that he needs the world to revolve around him. And maybe one could argue that's a flaw he's expressing to the world, but the way he delivers this message is as if he's proud of that trait. Second song, entitled Fuss and Fight, opens up with this line. Yeah, moving on. The song's message is just awful, literally justifying his problems and saying people have to deal with the real him rather than him self-improving. And this is a running theme that goes on throughout the album, and the album sort of tries to have an arc of self-improvement, but it makes it seem like he tried to be good to the people who cared about him, and no, he didn't try. He was a jerk the whole time, and while he directs the blame at himself, it's as if he's still excusing this horrible behavior. And while it does get a little better with the handling of this arc as it goes along, it ends up saying very little. With how pretty mediocre the writing is. This is Pain Honey's chorus. So take away my pain money, I'm sick and tired of this rain. I drink away my pain money until I'm begging for the rain. I find this writing just very cheap and stupid, with it overwhelmingly relying on the exact same rhymes. For an album that's so eager to tell a compelling story, it can't even get a proper story flow in the individual songs. And as we near the end of the story, it actually does take a clever subversion I do find pretty compelling, with the track entitled February 28th, 2016, which sees Koe spiraling down again, apparently going on a bender. The message is actually really accurate with those who struggle with addiction, but the message is really the only good part of this song. I've yet to talk about the production of this album because it low-key sucks. For the most part, everything is so overproduced, and it's hard to hear any musicianship within the song, which is something I really enjoy from rock bands. Hearing all the instruments blend together yet have equal moments to shine are just so good for my ears. Koe decides to make everything blare so you can only hear the overwhelming guitar and percussion, and his voice is drowned out at times, making whatever he has to say very difficult to enjoy. And yeah, even when the songs are calmer in the instrumental variety, his songs are just pretty bland. They don't offer anything truly fun or compliment anything Koe has to say, and that's another thing. I don't like Koe's voice. Even when his lyrics are pretty palatable, Koe just doesn't come across as a strong vocalist. Zach Bryan, who isn't that strong of a singer, shines in his delivery. Meanwhile, Koe just gives a pretty shallow vocal performance that, while not terrible, doesn't give me anything truly emotional or compelling. Speaking of which, he teams up with another artist whose vocals I don't like, with Parker McCollum. Love has the most traditional feel to it, seeing as he's partnering with a Texas country star, and it brings in some heavy subject material that I'm sure most will applaud, but I'm indifferent on this track. Once more, the variety of instrumentals and vocals set the tone pretty horribly for how dark the message is. This isn't like in Merry-Go-Round or How the World Works, where the lighthearted instrumentals are designed to sugarcoat certain messages that have dark undertones. It's just a song with a pretty optimistic tone handling thoughts of depression and heartbreak, and it just doesn't work for me. Front Seat Row sees Koe apologizing, and it's a pretty shallow apology if you ask me. We are in the second to last track and you're repeating the same mistakes as the one of your tracks above, saying, hey, it's my fault, but I want this and that, and still won't try to get better. Like I said, maybe this works for some people, but it doesn't for me. And the final track, Shadow People, uses the excuse of faith in a higher power to justify his horrible behavior, saying he was never given an answer to how to change. Like, what the hell? This is probably my least favorite song on the album for how infuriating its message truly is. All in all, Noise Complaint was an attempt, I wouldn't say an earnest one, but an attempt at creating a compelling narrative that for the most part just happens to fall apart with major tonal killers in the production and instrumental spheres, having most things blare and be overproduced, and not letting the messages speak for themselves, which don't have anything compelling to say, so maybe that's why all the blaring happened, as well as having some horrible plot developments throughout its entirety. Koe Wetzel started off pretty bad in my book. Rating wise, I'm feeling a strong 4 out of 10 on Noise Complaint. Now on to the next album. His next studio recorded album was entitled Herald So High, which a lot of people said was much better than the first. And was it? You're darn tootin'. But is it good? We'll cross that road when we get there. So yeah, Herald So High for the most part is a pretty vast improvement over everything Koe tried to do on Noise Complaint. The opener, which Koe seems to love doing on all his albums, sees Koe performing at a talent show, and the crowd's reactions perfectly showcase how I feel about him as an artist. A couple of cheers and a couple of boos. And yeah, for the most part, the instrumentals are actually fun. There are plenty of great moments like in What You Deserve or Powerball. The album is still pretty overproduced, but at least here the tone of the instrumentals completely match the tone of whatever Koe is trying to tell us. Songwriting wise, the album hasn't improved much. There are moments here where he shows us some sort of a clever line, like did what I wanted to but what I needed to in Forever. It's nothing huge, but seriously, compare this to what he was doing before. And not to totally upsell the songwriting improvement, man, there are some major misses in this album. Songs such as Love the Way You Hate Me repeat the same phrase constantly, and in Ragweed, it's just Koe hating on this girl's parents and multiple stepdads, and it gets old real fast. But I will say, his vocal performance has drastically improved since Noise Complaint. There's a lot more pain and emotion that wasn't in his voice before that I find a bit interesting, and the filters and audio effects applied to his voice often give this haunting tone to a lot of the darker leaning tracks. The gag of the whole thing taking place in a school is fine. Based off how many streams they have, no one really listens to them, and it makes you ask the question of why they needed to be here, because while I don't necessarily hate it, it adds nothing compelling to the rest of the album, much like the annoying phone messages in Can't Say Ain't Country. Now, while I don't think it suffered from most of the same mistakes Noise Complaint did, its sense of incompetent production is pretty much the same as the last album. Nothing really is ever allowed to breathe properly, and it's all shoved in your face. It's just a lot of interesting things jumbled into a pie that feels rushed out, and the other thing I don't like is the sexual tension in a lot of this album. Normally, I don't mind it, but Koe really puts it out there, and I just find it gross a lot of the time, with how much he really wants to go into that. It doesn't make for anything compelling, but rather more disgusting, and it really holds it back from overall being a good record in my eyes. For the most part, Herald So High is an improvement over the first in vast ways. Koe has a much more energetic presence on this album, instrumentals shine more in ways it never did on Noise Complaint, and songwriting, while better, delves into subjects I'm not too keen on revisiting, so while it has its setbacks, I think I enjoyed myself. Anyways, I'm somewhere between a decent to strong 6 out of 10 for Herald So High. And now, onto the final album of this binge listen, Sellout. Now, this album specifically was the reason I made this video. People were hyping this album to such an extreme high when it was released, saying it was this raw, dark, and mature look into depression, and I love those, but Evermore came around the same time, so I chose Taylor Swift. The biggest thing you should get out of this video is Evermore is great, and go listen to it. But yeah, I never did check out Koe after that because I had to prep for list week, Sturgill released a new album, and I just never had the time. So when I did check out the album, I saw it's not bad, but it's not good. And when I checked out the reviews and sauce people were giving this, they were insane. Like, this was on the level of Purgatory, Mr. Misunderstood, and meta modern sounds in country music. Has everyone lost their minds? Like, seriously, these albums are masterpieces not just for what they say, but because they are well written, well sung, and well produced. That's not what this album is. It is such a major downside to what quality was present on Herald So High. Once more, we got another generic opening with these studio executives, literally saying the album is garbage, and yeah, I kind of agree with them to a bit of a lesser extent. And this whole intro is about these studio guys trying to get Koe to sell out and make pop country. And let me stop you right there, buddy boy. Many have said that this intro has called out the Nashville industry, and okay, yeah, it did. But literally everyone on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter do that on the daily. Ever since Pandering by Bo Burnham was released, the amount of critical commentary has increased by quite a lot. And this stupid intro ends up saying so little that people already know. The first song I just rolled my eyes at was the title. I am willing to bet when making the titles for these songs, they put a C where the K was and they realized how dumb they were and had to change it almost immediately. Country and Western is a COVID anthem for people who are sick and tired of quarantine, and it has some pretty interesting lines, but for the most part, if I wanted a COVID anthem, I'd probably just listen to Look Who's Inside Again by Bo Burnham, which is much more entertaining and compelling. And here's where we get into the same problem that's been on every Koe record: the production. And dear Lord, the production here is some of the worst I've ever seen. And by worse, I mean it's so much more irritating than any work Joey Moy has ever done. You know, the guy who's made some of the worst country singles to ever touch radio. If you thought the production on these albums sucked, woo, buddy boy, you ain't seen the half of it. Anything serious Koe has to say which deserves a more serious tone and sound is absolutely crushed by the awful instrumentals present in this album. I love how people laugh at bands like these and love Koe Wetzel when there is no difference in either's instrumentals and tonal qualities. The great effects applied to Koe's voice? Well, they're gone and replaced with this nail-scratching filter. Koe for almost the entire record gives us a vocal performance that is honestly just as annoying as Dustin Lynch's Tullahoma, if not worse. Legit, the only thing on this album that I think improved or at least wasn't ruined, as I'm not so sure how I feel about it, is the songwriting. It's a bit sharper for a majority of the album, there's a fair amount of witty phrases, but when everything else sucks so badly, the best songwriting in the world can't save you. And the writing tends to be the most praised aspect of Sellout, the thing people mostly relate to Simpson and Isbell level. And boy, this ain't near the level of either of them. The best song on here is a D tier song for Isbell or Sturgill. People applaud the takes on depression and substance abuse on this record. Now look, I have no right to say whether or not these stances on depression work objectively. In subjects like these, beauty is truly in the eye of the beholder. But for me, frankly, these depictions are worse than the ones in 13 Reasons Why. The portrayals of depression I adore are the ones that give you real life, where you don't have good-natured characters, rather real people who will succumb to doing bad things. It's kinda why BoJack Horseman is my favorite work of art ever. Songs like Outcast just feel so forced, and it kinda angers me on a personal level with how they are portrayed. Good Die Young, the song everyone lauds as one of, if not the best song of 2020, it just doesn't work for that reason. Any deep message of depression is just shoved in awkward delivery, horrible instrumentals, and just flat out awful production. You wanna know why songs like That Funny Feeling and Mr. Misunderstood work so well for me and are masterpieces? It's because they blend their messages with how they portray it. Bo sees the world beyond saving, and much how he gives up gives us a simple 6-string performance in contrast to all the hyper-synth pop the rest of the album has. Mr. Misunderstood is a song giving off the message of understanding. This is why Mr. Misunderstood works. It's his somber delivery that comes from a place of empathy that makes it so compelling. Meanwhile, look at how Koe delivers. See what I mean? How can I emote when you are trying to blow out my eardrums? It doesn't blend the emotions of the message and how he says it at all. I've seen people tell me you have to be depressed in order to enjoy this album. And to those people, you know who you are, I respectfully say, shut up. Depression, while something I understand is a serious issue, doesn't excuse the quality of the album. If you are depressed and this album works for you and helps you, that makes me happy and I wish you the best. But saying I need to be in a specific mental state in order to enjoy an album properly is an insult to those who suffer from depression. I cannot get invested in anything Koe is trying to say seriously, depressed or not. Which is why, ironically, my favorite songs on here are the non-serious ones. No joke, the songs that are just flat out really stupid, I kinda love. Lubbock is easily one of the catchiest and most fun songs I've listened to in a while, almost makes you forget how awful the rest is. And Koe utilizes his skill set greater than any song on any of his records. The other really enjoyable song being post-Sellout. And before we get into this, I'll address the one and only issue with this song first. The whole narrative of Koe becoming a sellout is kinda stupid. They have the one intro in the beginning and then this conversation in post-Sellout before the song actually begins. That doesn't really make for a compelling narrative. 2 flipping songs don't equal a narrative-driven album. But with that out of the way, yeah, this song is pretty funny. Koe himself even admits this song literally has nothing to do with the message of the album. And honestly, hey, I don't care. Koe's delivery and the sudden change to a southern gentleman is really funny and much more interesting than anything on the record. The more sexual tones in this song work for me because it's literally a joke, unlike songs in Herald So High where he is very serious. So as a whole, while the songwriting is an overall improvement, everything else on this album gets a complete and utter downgrade. Normally, I would give this album a 4 out of 10, but Lubbock and Post-Sellout are so good, it gets a 5 out of 10. Ranking wise, Herald So High easily takes the title for the best, Sellout barely scrapes the second place spot, leaving Noise Complaint and its annoyance in dead last. So yeah, as a whole, Koe averages out to a 5 out of 10 artist. I don't hate Koe, and he clearly knows what he's doing given his demographic, but I cannot get into him whatsoever. His brand of Texas rock at best comes off mildly interesting to flat out annoying. And like I said in the beginning, if he worked for you, that's awesome. I know people who view Sturgill or think Eric Church is the same way I do with Koe. Are they right? No. But are they wrong? Also no. The same applies to me and my perspective of Koe. No one is truly bad and no one is truly good. You might have some people that share the same opinion as you, and you'll have people like me who don't. If you think Koe Wetzel made the next Southeastern, go ahead, you're entitled to think that. I just personally think Koe is held to such a ridiculous standard and it made any possibility of enjoying what was there very difficult. Love him or hate him, he's Koe Wetzel, and nothing is really going to change that.